So, welcome everybody back to the main stage. We are at our last session of the day. So, I hope everybody's been kind of enjoying their experiences, listening to great talks, but most of all, connecting and collaborating. That's what most of our sessions have been about today, just getting together in groups and talking about what we want the world to look like, what we want our careers to look like, and what are we going to do to make ourselves like kind of better people and more inspired to be able to do the work we want to do in the world. So that's kind of what we've been doing all day, and how we close out, well, how we plan to close out the next 2 days and is basically what we call campfire chats. So basically what this is, the whole theme of the event is like just kind of like camp and retreating and just going in and gathering and creating meaning when we gather. So we close out with these campfire chats, and it's basically just to have like an intimate conversation like you would have around a campfire, and to gain inspiration, but also to ignite ideas. So I'm happy to be joined with Heba Elhanafy, and we're going to talk about cities and building the cities that we deserve. And she's like the perfect person for this conversation because she's an architect, she's an urban planner, a developer, and a researcher. And she's also currently an urban researcher at the Charter Cities Institute. So Heba, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I would love to talk about cities any day, every day. So thank you. So as you mentioned, yes, my background, I did my bachelor degree in architecture and planning, and I then realized that a really good building will not change the world, but we need to think a little bit more broader. So I did my master's degree in urban development. I'm originally from Alexandria, Egypt. This is where I lived most of my life, but I worked and lived a little bit around Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. And I'm currently based in Washington, D.C., as you said, working for the Charter Cities Institute as their urban researcher.
Cool. So, and I guess I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Ngozi Odita. I'm founder of AFRICANXT, and we create spaces and programming that bring people together who are passionate about Africa. So that's what we're doing here today. And so we'll start our conversations with something that I actually read in your bio, and how you say that you're passionate about arts, or you're hugely interested in the arts, culture, heritage, and community. So I wanted to, because those are all like really important things. So I wanted to start our conversation with why are those things important for us to take in consideration when we're thinking about building our cities and reimagining our cities? Why is art, culture, and heritage so central to that?
That's a really interesting question, and let's get into like an example really quickly. Let's go into, for instance, downtown Cairo or downtown Lagos. This really colonial, very kind of quote unquote well-planned white streets. The same streets are planned for other European cities, right? They basically have the same structure, but how they're used in Cairo and how they're used in Paris is completely different. And from how they are used, this actually shapes completely the city. It's the traffic, it's people who sell things on the streets, even how people walk, how women walk, how children occupy the spaces. So when you're thinking about the cities, like in a lot of the curriculums that we study in schools, we think about like streets, how we design them, how long they are, this kind of stuff, but we often forget the lived experiences of people who live there, the economics that drive those lived experiences, those kind of stuff. That's why heritage is quite important. The culture that people bring to the streets are quite important, because you can design, I mean, there is no perfect design, but you can literally design the perfect design, but without taking in consideration the lived experiences, the economics, and all of this kind of stuff, it really doesn't make any sense. That's why, for me, this kind of things are really important to think about when you're thinking about cities.
Yeah, I think like, especially coming out of 2020 and just everything that year brought to us, like we really saw how our cities, like many cities, failed people. And we saw the importance of how our cities need to be able to serve us, but also how, as citizens, what are we doing to serve our cities? Like that was such an important like lesson I think we got out of COVID, and as we're moving forward and like thinking about, okay, well, what do we need our cities to look like, and how should they be serving us? Um, what do you like? What are some of the things that come into your mind? Because we have to think about like, what do the cities of the future look like? How are we going to be safe in those cities? So, what are things that you think about in ensuring that citizens are safe in urban cities?
Yes, well, I think what you talked about with COVID was like really interesting because like the urbanists everywhere have been talking about how our cities are not designed for people. They're not designed for their needs, whether it's economic or whether it's social or whether it's environmental. It's just not designed for us. It's designed for some cars or like certain elites or whatever. It's just not designed by us. And in especially in Africa, it's not even designed by us. So I think that brought the light, like COVID brought the light that, okay, I can't walk anywhere. If I'm hungry, I have to get into, if I have a car, I'm safe. If I don't have a car, I have to get into public transportation. That probably sucks, and it will take a lot of time, and I will be exposed to this virus. So even if I'm fortunate enough to be able to stay at home, I can't really stay home, right? Or I have to order something or these kinds of stuff. So I think it brought to light the fact that we are so dependent on, in a lot of areas, we're so dependent on cars, and in a lot of other areas, it's just the city just not designed for us. And we just really need to rethink what does it mean to design cities for people on, I mean, generally, but also very specifically in the context of the city that it is in. So I think that's what really we need to think about when we're moving into the future. What does the people need? Why are they moving to this city? Why is there a problem? And work from there instead of, like implementing utopias and these kind of ideas. So
I think like a lot of what you're saying is like designing. Like we have to like redesign our cities to function in a way that allows us to be healthy and also allows us to prosper, right? A lot of people go to urban cities because they're looking for prosperity or for better lives, but often that's not what they find in cities. So we need to figure out how are we better designing our cities to allow people to achieve what they need to achieve. And so that brings us to this concept of charter cities, because essentially it's people saying, I think I know a better way, or I think I have an idea of what a city that will be more functional or more prosperous can look like. So maybe you can tell people, what is a charter city? Because a lot of people hear that word and they're like, I don't get it. So
yeah, I also didn't get it a year ago before I joined. So I mean, it's fine if nobody gets it. So basically, just to make it quite simple, charter cities is basically a new city with a new law. So I come from Egypt. In the past 40 years, we had more than 40 new city projects. Just this year, we have 21 new city projects that are happening. And those cities, since the 70s, they've been failing. Why? Because of the simple, like mathematical information. If you build a city by the same rules that failed the past 100 cities, the new city is gonna fail. So what do we need to do is that there is a huge population surge all over Africa. We do need new cities, but when we build those new cities, we need laws that actually work for those cities. We need special jurisdictions to allow those cities to be competitive economically, so they can actually provide that economic development that people look when they move to a city. Why would I leave my city, which has everything, to a new city that probably is not going to have all of the services and probably going to be away from my parents? Is because I have a better opportunity or a better work opportunity. Why I'm right now in Washington, D.C. and I'm not in Alexandria is because it's not because of the weather, but it's because it's literally a better economic opportunity. So we really need to rethink and redesign the cities according to what people need and according to the way that we're gonna implement economic development for them. So this is basically, hopefully, I got through what a charter city is.
So I think it's when we think about like kind of creating any kind of new space or any kind of new initiative, and we started off talking about this, like making sure it serves the people that it's for, how do we with charter cities like ensure that it's because it's a new city, like, but it's not new in the sense that people weren't there already. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So how are we ensuring that we're taking into consideration the people who were there before? And as new people decide to come to this charter city because of the opportunity and they feel like they can prosper there, how do we continue to take into consideration the people who have already been there?
So basically, the kind of charter city model that Charter Cities Institute is kind of backing up is actually a new city, like a new city that is built on a greenfield site. So it is somewhat a new city, or it's built like in a greenfield site. So there is not a lot of consideration that you have to take when you're building this new city. And those kind of new cities are literally everywhere around Africa right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are not functioning, and we need to think about like why they're not functioning and ask ourselves those kind of questions. But also you can do like charter city-esque elements within the city. You can charter a certain service, or you can charter a certain something and just give it jurisdiction that's going to make it a little bit better. So like, yeah, there is a perfect image of what a charter city, not a perfect image, but like a goal of what a charter city is and where it can completely be, it can completely serve, but you can also use this kind of elements within an existing city to improve economic development, to improve services, to improve whatever you need to have it improved.
And when you have, because you have the perspective of like, you research this, you study this, so you see where it works, where it's not working. You have, I'm sure you have like lots of ideas of like better models. Oftentimes, like this issue of like equity is a huge problem. Like you build these new cities, like in Lagos, whether it's like a Echo Atlantic or Banana Island, you have to think about, well, who is the city for, right? Because again, we started talking about like cities are supposed to serve people. Well, if we're building these new cities, who are they really for? And if the majority of the population can't afford to live in that city, then how does it serve purpose? So like from your research and what you're seeing, like how are we dealing with those equity questions?
Yes, that's a great question, and that's also like the main problem of the newer cities that are being built in all over Africa. They're not serving what they're I mean, they are serving certain people, but they're not serving all people. And those kind of cities end up creating slums or ghettos just outside of them, because like even in their structure, they're not counting for the workers who are gonna serve the city. So you can see that with Brasilia in the 1960s. You can see it with cities that were built in the 1970s, 1980s, where you have slums on the periphery, again, like the cities who were built like 200 years ago, because they're not counting even for people. But the question of it is like how to really create a city that's gonna take all classes in consideration. And I think that is the main goal, or the main thing that we're thinking about in charter cities, like actually taking this equity question and providing work opportunities for everyone, not to just work for like a service industry, but actually to have an opportunity to grow while the city is growing, not to just create it for a certain class. So I think different economic opportunities, different work opportunities, that's the main thing that's going to actually provide an equity for everyone in the city. So yeah, just provide different jobs and make the jobs work for the people, and it's hopefully going to work out.
Do you have any like examples of any cities or like any particular, or it may not necessarily the whole city, but like you're like, okay, this particular project, like it kind of checks all the buckets. Like, you know, Charter City Institute kind of like has like, what's their model? Like, are there any current cities or ones that are about to be built that kind of are like, okay, well, this is a good model, or here's something to look at?
So I think that most of the cities that we're working with currently have elements of a charter city kind of model. We have like not the perfect model, but like the model that we aim to see in our like in a future charter city, that we have it in the model charter and the model registration that are already on the website. We have the governance handbook, which outlines kind of like all the governance structures of a possible future charter city. And like this is like a guide for the developers and the future planner that they can use to guide this. We also have the planning guidelines coming out soon, like in a month or two. It also outlines the thinking of urban planning. So those things we are working with a number of cities on the ground that have kind of charter city elements. We have Nakwashi, we have other cities that we're working with. So yeah, we have these kind of elements that are happening, and we have like the perfect model. So yeah.
So for people who are, because like you said, there's no necessarily perfect model. You have different entities you work with, and they have certain pieces of it. So as people, as individuals, or people who are thinking about like economic development and city development, if you were to say example, like these are things that you must consider, what would be like a few, like 3 things like we all need to be considering as we're reimagining our cities?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So if we want to talk about 3 things, well, first we're going to talk about work or economics. People move to cities for better economic opportunities, and we need to give it to them. And this is a very important also element on the equity question that you brought up earlier. What kind of jobs are there going to be produced in the city? What kind of industries are you going to produce in the city? So first of all, make sure that the work or the economic opportunities do apply for people with all work skills, with all that come from different economic opportunities. And that's something that's actually going to grow throughout the years. We don't want somebody to come and live all of his life as, I don't know, an X amount of job with no chance for him to do better, or with no good insurance or this kind of stuff. So first of all, think about the work opportunities. Think how you're going to build that labor market and how you're going to make it sustainable, and how can you include the people in it. The second thing, think about the communities and the culture. Where are you building this? How do people already live in the cities? Because what people tend to do is that they tend to take the same structures or things that they do in their existing city and just like take it with them. So for instance, in a lot of African cities, you have informal forms, quote unquote, informal forms of transportation. For instance, in Alexandria, this is the best way you can get around the formal transportation. It really is the slowest thing ever. So if I'm going to build a new city outside of Alexandria, probably people who lived in Alexandria are going to come with these informal kind of ways. Don't strict that, regulate that, and help it become part of the city. So this is an example of how can you include the already existing culture in the new city, or even in an existing city, build on how the people are using the city or their models. The third thing, and it's really important, is about the rules. And this is talking about like the urban rules, the urban planning rules, but rules are in general. In a lot of African cities, well, the rules are completely colonial. It's the same rules that the colonizer put 200 years ago, and we're still working with them. Even in the urban planning domain, and this is where my expertise comes in, the rules have not changed. Like in a lot of African cities, especially Sub-Saharan African, the rules have not changed whatsoever. Those cities that were built to exclude Africans and to keep them outside of the city, we're still using the same rules to build our cities. And that's why they're still kind of not working. So yeah, if you think about work, if you think about the community you're going to move in, and if you think about the rules that needs to be changed in a general idea, I think that's really 3 main things that you can think for the cities.
So when we're thinking about, so you kind of outline what we should be thinking about. I know for a lot of people, they're like, and for cities in general, because we are still in a pandemic, there's still a lot of things that are broke that you're trying to fix. Like a lot of people are not even so much as thinking ahead.
Yeah.
They're trying to fix the right now. You know what I mean? They're like, okay, we need to get this virus under control. We need to figure out like employment. So many people are unemployed. Things are, quite frankly, broken. And it can feel like really dismal. Like, I guess for people who are like city planners or people who have projects, they're like, I was trying to build a whole city and now the world has stopped. in all of that, what are like some bright spots? Like, what are things that you're like excited about, or projects that you're excited about that maybe they were able to still continue despite the pandemic?
You know what I'm really excited about is this kind of conversations. I think generally we never had to really, I mean, we kind of had, but not really had to kind of sit down or sit home and like think a little bit, like, and evaluate where we are. Are we going in the right direction? And especially with cities, is the fact that we've been like in an emergency mood for so long, and by so long I mean since forever. We're just like, okay, we have slums, we need to figure it out. We have trash, we need to figure it out. We have whatever, we need to figure it out. We have people, we need to make them work. And we've just been doing things, and some of these things have been working, but a lot of those things have not been working. So I think what I'm excited about is that now we have the chance for people from all over the world to just sit back and like reflect for like even 5 minutes and have this conversation and ask those questions and think about things a little bit differently. And I think this is one of the really important things that I'm excited about. And the other thing is the fact that a lot of cities have been, okay, finally looking at, you know, a street level, right? So like I always say that you really want to fix a city, you work on two levels. You work on the meta level and you ask yourself those big questions, who's planning for whom, equity, this kind of stuff. And then you go into a street and then you work with that community. And I think what COVID did is that like it took away everything from us, but it left us like empty streets, right? And then people started working, okay, how am I going to make this street better? How am I going to make this neighborhood better? How am I going to make those things safer? So it started going back to that community level that is so essential in building out a city, especially an existing one. And it made us rethink it a little bit. So this is kind of where I'm seeing, okay, now we understand how important streets are, and now we understand that we need to think about like a bit of a meta level. And I think we're gonna go somewhere if we kind of continue on those two levels. So
I think so, because it's interesting. Like, there's so many stories of how like cities began to literally in real time have to like change. Like, it's interesting how so many things that people were unwilling to do, right? That was impossible. We can't do that. We can't figure it out. Like, COVID made us, right. Yes. We had to figure things out because so much was at stake, right? So before we just, people, you know, governments, people, companies thought they had forever, right? Like, nothing stuff felt imminent. Then COVID came and it was like people are literally dying like all over the world. Like, if we don't fix what's wrong, like the world's a mess. The world stopped. And like you said, it stopped, and everybody had to think like what we do matters. And if we don't fix it and change course, like we don't know what's going to happen. So it's just interesting to see how cities quickly began to transform.
Yeah.
And how the world began to change. Like, hearing about like the canals in Venice becoming clear, the water being clear in the canals in Venice, less pollution everywhere. All of a sudden, streets that couldn't be closed for pedestrians were now closed, and people were encouraged to go to parks. Like, all the things that would make cities better could not be done. Then all of a sudden during COVID, it was like, oh, we're making our cities better. So
they were done so fast, and that was very interesting.
Rapidly.
You know, people since the 70s, especially in cities like New York, whatever, they've been fighting for things so much, and they've been protesting, and then COVID happened, and then we realized that they can happen so easily. We just need the will to do them, right? So
exactly. And that's such an important thing you said, right? Like, the will to do it, and also a willingness to cooperate, right? Because I think that's another part of it too. Like, people often don't feel like cooperating or collaborating, like there's value in that, right? But we had, like, during COVID, we had to like figure out ways to like work, like what's happening in another city, what can we learn from that city, even across continents. We had to like be hyper aware, because I think another thing that COVID that showed that we were so intertwined, like our cities are literally intertwined. Like, started in China, and like it was in the US that quickly, because our cities are so intertwined. And I think all those realizations hopefully are giving us, like, you know, has lit the fire under us to be like, okay, we need to change stuff, and now we can do it quicker.
We need to wake up.
It was
exactly.
like a wake-up call. So I want to know, like, if you were to think about, like, we're talking about building the cities we deserve and the future, like, what does that look like? Like 20 years from now, I remember, like, as a kid, like, thinking, like, oh, there'll be flying cars, like,
Yeah,
for sure at this point. There's no flying cars. We're not in outer space. Like, none of that has happened.
yeah.
So if you were to think about, like, okay, 20 years from now, like, what do our cities look like? What does that future look like? Like, what are you thinking about? What are the things you'd like to see?
One of the things I like to see, I would like to see cities that are built according to needs, right? That are not just built out of the blue or things are happening because somebody had think that this is the right idea. It's built out of needs, and those needs come from the community, they come from economic needs, or they come from environmental needs. They come from something that is a little bit beyond of how a nice street should look like, or do we need, I don't know, like driverless cars or these kind of, I want to say, ideas. But I think if we just like put the community needs, and these needs are economic, environmental, all this kind of stuff, I think everything is gonna figure itself out, right? But as long as we kind of put the, I don't know, planner needs or planner ideas or architect's ideas or this kind of stuff in the middle of our conversations about cities, then we'll not. So I would like to see the community come a little bit, community and economic needs come a little bit to the front of the, the stage when we talk about cities. No flying cars. I would really hope that like we don't like it's too much energy. Like I would rather just like spend that energy somewhere else.
Right.
I would spend it in like neighborhoods that need actually some help. I would spend it on services.
Mm-hmm.
I would spend it on so many things. And this is also one of the things that COVID showed us. It's like we have a lot of power and we have a lot of resources, just where we put those resources.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to take those resources that we have and we're going to invent flying cars, we're probably going to have really nice flying cars. But I really, really hope that cities don't invest in flying cars and they just invest in neighborhoods, they invest in people, they invest in economic development, they invest in economic opportunities, they invest in schools and these kind of stuff rather than probably nice, I don't know, flying cars.
So I wanted to go into the chat. We have a couple of interesting comments. So somebody like is talking about developing like solutions, and they talked about like African cities need to develop their own tools and paradigms. And I think that's something a lot of people talking about, saying like oftentimes stop trying to look at Western stuff and then come to Africa and do it, or Africans looking at a model in the West and trying to create it here. So what do you think about that? Like African cities and the importance of developing our own tools and paradigms for how we reimagine our cities?
Yes. So here is the thing. When it comes to especially African cities, so what happened post-colonialism is that there was like a huge need that we need to modernize, right? But we didn't really have any modern elements, so we took the colonizers' model elements and we implemented to us, and we're like, okay, we're modernizing and we're building streets and stuff like that. But we really didn't have the knowledge at this point. A lot of the cities didn't have planners. There is a really nice book. It's called Order Without Design, and it's written by this urban planner, Alan Porto, who's really smart and everything. But where he got his first experience was in post-colonial Algeria. There was no urban planners at this point, so he literally had to go there. He's a French urban planner. He literally had to go there to be an urban planner in a very important municipality. And it was like really interesting to me. It's like, the Algerians fought for like so many years, and a million of them got killed so they can kick the French out. And then once they kicked them out, they got a French urban planner to design their cities. And I mean, he's a nice guy and he did really good things, but what if he wasn't? What if somebody else? And I'm sure that happened everywhere around, Africa. And then right now that we're building our new cities and we're trying to advance, we're also copying. What are we copying now? We're copying Dubai. We're thinking that's okay. We had like this north-south kind of copying, and now we're having this south-south kind of copying. We're copying Dubai, we're copying Singapore, and it's really not. Again, it's not gonna work. we're and especially in I mean, it worked for America. America copied a lot of things. DC is basically a copy of Rome, right? But like, we come from a lot of background, a lot of culture, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of also great civilization that we can't.
And great cities. Like, it's so, like, if people look at African history, many great cities, like Benin City, there were so many great cities.
Exactly. And this is also a problem, that a lot of pre-colonial cities were kind of erased. The history with colonization, it erased all of these great pre-colonial cities, which we also wrote about in Charter Cities. Yeah, so it's like, yeah, we just need to start doing our own stuff. I mean, I'm not going to say we're going to get it right away, but like, we should just, at least we need to start trying. That's why it's like, this conversation is really important to bring to, the stage, the fact that we need to talk about this kind of stuff. We need to stop copying, and we need to like put communities, both people, both economic needs at the core of everything, and just, start planning according to this.
Yeah. So we have another person, and they're mentioning Eco Atlantic. And I think that's like an example of like looking at another model and saying, okay, that can work here. And they're saying that these type of cities really are only going to serve high income individuals and businesses. So what's the alternative?
So the alternative is, for instance, can't remember the name of the city to save my life, but there is a city in Guatemala that is being built currently for lower income citizens. So its anchor tenant is industrialization, low skilled workers, and then you build up your city from there. So this is the alternative. It's actually building cities that are going to take people, or take people out of poverty, serve all income people at different income points, and get them out of poverty and give them an opportunity, give them an out. People move to the cities to find work, for better chances, for safety, for this kind of stuff. Just design cities that people need. Like, they know what they need, just do it. That is also what Charter City does. It just like takes away all of this kind of weird rules that have been ruling cities for millions and millions of years. And just like, okay, we have a blank page, we have a blank slate, and now we can do what we actually need to do to achieve that economic development, to give people those work opportunities that they've been longing for so long, to give them the social security, this kind of stuff. So, yeah.
So we have somebody who mentioned Puerto Rico. I guess that's where she's based. And she's saying that's what we're doing here in Puerto Rico, and especially in the realm of agriculture. So what do you think, like, because oftentimes we are looking at cities in the West, or like the Dubai, but we can look at like similar cities and ecosystems. So like looking at Puerto Rico or Haiti or Brazil, and then thinking about like Nigeria, there's similarities. So how do we kind of look for other like countries and cities that we are more similar, like, and can learn from?
I think that's a great example. And even like the research I'm working with Charter Cities on right now with the urban planning, all of at the end of the day, you don't produce something from scratch completely, right? There are experiences that you build on, there are rules, there are theories, there are a lot of empirical evidence. And I think that the most important thing is that you get your case studies, your empirical evidence from countries that look like you. I mean, and look like you, by that I mean that have the similar, economic situation, that have the similar culture situation, that have the similar environmental threats, that have the similar futures, or the similar aims, or the similar whatever. So, and by that, you don't copy everything from them. Again, you copy, or you don't copy, or you learn from their situation. How did they do good, for instance, in the realm of agriculture in Puerto Rico, like one of the commenters said, or the realm of, there are certain cities that are doing really well with, instance, with Singapore, they do really well with public housing and affordable housing. But what we looked at was just like that tall, kind of shiny building, that's it. But a lot of those tall, shiny buildings have a lot of public and affordable housing. We didn't get that. We just got the like tall, shiny buildings. So even from the north, and even from the south kind of thing that we copy, we tend to copy the wrong things instead of, like this thing that really work, or, like Dubai had a really good competitive economics that we kind of tend to forget about, but also see the Burj Khalifa, and that's it. I mean, Burj Khalifa is nice, but there are also other nice things that we can learn from. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting. In a session I was attending in earlier, and a person was mentioned Dubai, and they were like, Dubai celebrates, like, she was like saying like the happiest month, like they have, like she was talking about things in Dubai that were like really, really great. So it's like, yeah, there are other cities that you can model yourself after, but like us going and looking at the shiny things and tall buildings rather than kind of like digging in and seeing like what's working, like what are things that they're doing that are actually benefiting citizens. So yeah, there are things that we can find that we can emulate, but it's like, not getting stuck on the shiny things. So we have another question. The person is saying, what is the biggest backlash you have received from the idea of charter cities?
I think the biggest backlash was me actually before joining charter cities, and I didn't really get what was happening there. And like in my first interview, I remember I was like, "So guys, so what is really I mean, this is really what you're thinking. This is really what you're happening, because like it takes like 1, 2, 3 seconds for you to understand what it is. Although it's like really quite simple. It's just a new city with better rules, with things that work for people." I think the biggest backlash that I thought of at this point is like, then where does the national government come in? Because you do need, like, this city can be like greatest city in the world. It can lift millions of people out of poverty, but it does need to have a spillover effect. So like, let's say we build the perfect charter city. It has, I don't know, everyone there lives happily. We need to make sure that this spillover actually goes into the rest of the country, right? So this would actually, like, once I started working, actually, once I started getting this question answered, I realized, no, there is a huge chance for a spillover. There's a huge chance to make a case study. Okay, if this city works, then the country is going to easily adapt some of its rules. And this kind of happened on a very small scale. And like Shenzhen, when Shenzhen, they got this kind of special economic rules that they worked with than the rest of China. And then, China realized, this is actually working. This is a really good economic opportunity. And they actually started by that easing up the roads and easing up their trade loads. And this is where, after we saw 10 years after Shenzhen began to be really good, then the whole country actually began to have that spillover effect. So I think that was one of the questions that I had about charter cities before joining. But then, like, once you see those case studies and when you see like what Dubai did for and this is one of also things that we can learn from Dubai, it's like what Dubai did to Emirates in general and its image, and like not just even for Emirates, but for the whole freaking Middle East, right? This is where you can see, cities can change themselves, but they can also change and have a spillover effect for the whole country.
And have you noticed, or with any of your partners or the people that you're who come to you for guidance, like community pushback? Like, when people are introducing these ideas of charter cities and starting to build, is there pushback, and what is that pushback?
I think the community will only have pushbacks if they don't get what they need. And mostly what they need is a really good job opportunity, is equity in the city, and a good place to live in, and a good school to send their kids at. So with the partner that we're working with the cities that we're working with, once this is provided, good economic opportunity that fits everyone, good house, good school to send my kids, that's probably about it. Like, if you give the people equity to the city, if you give the people good work opportunities, if they can see that it's a safe city that I can live in and grow up in, and for my kids, that's probably where it starts. It's probably where it stops. And when you involve the people in that conversation from the get-go, what do we need, how we're going to build? Because I mean, cities don't build overnight, right? Cities take years to build. They have different phases. So I mean, if people move in the first phase of your city, when you're building the second phase, or when you're imagining out the second phase, involve those people. Make sure that the city is being built out according to their needs, or according to their kids' needs, or according to their imagination as well. So once you involve the citizens and give them their basic needs, I think that's where any pushback would stop.
Cool. So we are at our time, but I wanted to close out and find out, I always like to know, like, where are people finding inspiration? You're doing all this great work, but you need to fill yourself up as you're putting all this out in the world. Like, what are you filling yourself up with? So where are you finding inspiration? Like, if you could recommend a book or a website or a podcast or anything to people for inspiration.
So a book I'm currently reading right now, it's called When Works Disappear. It's by this urban sociologist, William J. Wilson. And it takes this one neighborhood in the southeast side of Chicago, and it talks about what happened to downtown Chicago when work disappeared, right? What happened to those communities, and how it really broke the community relations, and it broke downtown. And it's a really good insight into how neighborhoods and cities interact. So I would definitely recommend that. The second thing that I actually listen to a lot is the Charter Cities podcast, because they do have a lot of people who work in the international development, in local development, and in economics, which are two things that I'm not really very well knowledgeable about. So I was like, okay, you have an economist now on like the Charter Cities, because I'm going to listen to this 2 times so I can really understand the whole concept a little bit more. So yeah, they have a very good or great range of people from different backgrounds. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that.
Cool. So thank you so much for spending time with us and closing out our day with us. I think people got lots of inspiration. I know I did. I'm always trying to figure out, like, that things can be better. So it's good to hear people who can give you insights and like some practical information that you feel like, okay, we're getting there. Like, things we might be able to turn the ship around. So thank you so much for giving us your time, Heba. And I look forward to connecting more and having more conversations. Like you said, that's one thing that COVID has done. It's allowed us to have more conversations in spaces. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And this event has been great. I've been listening to the talks in the morning, and it's really very inspiring, everything. So thank you for having me.
Cool. Thank you, and take care. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.